Good morning students, I Purnima welcome you to my class of English. Children, today I am going to revise the same lesson which we were doing, that is Mother's Day. So in Mother's Day what happened, two ladies are there. Mrs Pearson is there and she is fed up with her children. She is fed up with her children as they don't respect her, they don't realize her importance, they don't give her any values in the house. So she is not knowing how to deal with them, she is not knowing how to be strict with them, she is not knowing how to start with them to that how to live in the discipline. Not only her kids but her husband also insult her, and she poor lady, she is only a domestic, she only is busy in doing domestic work, and the people, they treat her like a servant. So when her friend visit to her house, Mrs. Fraser Lord, she feels bad for her and she thinks she feels bad for her, and she tells that you are bearing all this torture and tantrums of your husband and children. Mrs. Fraser Lord, she share her feeling that I don't know from where to start, how to tell them to live in discipline. So Mrs. Fraser Lord, she tells you, I will help you. And then she told me, I know a magic, I know an art which I have learned when my husband was away in East, and he was a lieutenant there, and there I had learned this art at how to change the bodies of each other. So we will change the body. That means Mrs. Pearson will become Fraser Lord and Mrs. Fraser Lord will become Mrs. Pearson. In the beginning, Mrs. Pearson agreed, but later on she was feeling scared. She did not agree for that. So Mrs. Fraser Lord, she started telling that you have to, if you want to gain respect in your house, if you want to have control in your family, so you have to do according to what I am saying. And then she goes to her house. Mrs. Fraser Lord, she become Mrs. Pearson. She goes to her house, and there what she do? She do nothing, but student, she just tell that she is very strict, and she has become very firm with all her husband and children. The people in the house, that is the boy and the girl and her husband, they are shocked to see her behavior, and they are not able to believe when they saw that she is drinking wine and she is smoking also. And so when the story start, that when her daughter comes, she started giving order to her to press her yellow silk dress and to prepare tea. Even her son comes and he orders tea, she straight away refuse. So the children are shocked. They are thinking that she is going crazy, she must have hit her head somewhere, because they never thought in a dream that she would be revolting, she would refuse to do her work. Now when her husband comes there, even he is shocked. She passes all the comments. Till now she was bearing all the insult which he was doing to her, but now she started commenting him. So even he is shocked and surprised. He is astounded at the behavior of his wife. And now children, she is telling that even I want to go for a holiday in the weekend. So we are here, Mrs. Pearson, it is not 40-hour week for all now. Now she is telling the work will be distributed equally to each other. I am not a servant of the house. She is telling, I am not the servant of the house, and even I need a holiday. We all will work 40 hours week. Just watch it at the weekend when I have my 2 days off. Now she straight away she told her kids and her husband that even she is going to take off for 2 days. Doris and Cyril exchange alarm glances. Doris and Cyril, they are very much shocked, because they never thought that her mother will behave in such a way. And Doris is a daughter, as I think you all know, and Cyril is a son of Mrs. Pearson. Well, Mrs. Pearson maintains her calm look. Now Cyril must grab something to eat, look as if I will need to keep my strength up. Now Cyril is very hungry. He goes to the kitchen to have something to eat, because till now his mother did not bring him anything to eat. He demanded that he wanted a tea and he wanted something to eat, but his mother straight away she refused. She told him, I'm not going to get up, you go and help yourself. Doris is surprised because she knew that she will have to do all the work. So she is surprised. She goes to near the settee and she said, "Mummy, you don't mean you're not going to do anything on Saturday or Sunday?" She straight away she asked her mother that, "Don't you will not do anything on Saturday and Sunday?" Mrs. Pearson, she explains, "No, I would not go that far." She told, "No, I will not go that far. It doesn't mean I will not do anything. I will do only light thing, like I will make a bed or two, or do a bit of cooking, only a small bit of cooking, which it will be considered as a favor from my side to you people, and I will have to be asked very nicely and thank for everything, and I will do your work when I will be asked in a very nice manner, and you must thank me for doing all the work and without making any fuss. But any of you 40 hours a weekers who expect to be waited on hand and foot on Saturday and Sunday with no thanks for it are in for a nasty disappointment." And she is telling, especially on Sunday and Saturday, if you will not put your foot down, if you will not help me, or if you will not ask in a polite manner, I will not do anything. Might go off for the weekend perhaps, and I will leave the house and go somewhere in the weekends. Children, here nasty means very bad or unpleasant. She explained that she might do a few petty tasks if she is pleasantly asked to do so and is duly thanked for performing them well. So she told them that I will be doing the work if I will be asked to do in a very nice manner. Doris, aghast, go out for the weekend. Aghast means filled with horror or shock. So what is the meaning of aghast? So Doris is telling, okay, that she might go, she told that it will be she's filled with horror or shock, and she's asking her mother again that will she go for the weekend. Mrs. Pearson, why not? I could do with a change, stuck here day after day, week after week. If I don't need a change, who does? Now she is telling, see, I'm working here for whole day and night, week after week, so who will need a change? It's me who really required a change. Doris, but where would you go? Who would you go with? Now Doris is thinking that her mother is very helpless. She cannot go out without anybody. So she's asking to whom you would go with. And in fact, Doris is confused as to where she would go and with whom. Mrs. Pearson, that's my business. You don't ask me where you should go and who you should go with, do you? Now, Mrs. Pearson, she replied to her in a very rude manner. She told, that doesn't mean that you are going to tell me that where I should go and with whom. Doris, Mrs. Pearson, the only difference is that I am a lot older and better able to look after myself. Now she told that I am older, and wherever I will go, I can look after myself. And so it's you who should do the asking, and it's you who should not ask me like that. Mrs. Pearson clarified that she is older than Doris and is in a better position to take care of herself. So it would make sense if Doris would take permission from Mrs. Pearson and not the other way around. Doris, did you fall or hit yourself with something? Now Doris is surprised because she has never seen her mother speaking like that. She is very much surprised. She is telling whether you have fallen down or something have happened to you. Doris finally asked Mrs. Pearson if she hit herself and got a concussion or something. Mrs. Pearson coldly, no, but I will hit you with something, girl, if you don't stop asking silly questions. So Mrs. Pearson, she bluntly, very angry, replied to her that if you will ask such type of silly question, definitely I will definitely hit you. Doris stares at her open mouthed, ready to cry. Doris, oh, this is awful. She began to cry. Okay, so she burst into tears. She started crying, And Mrs. Pearson, stop blubbering. You are not a baby now, Mrs. Pearson. She, instead of telling her some comfortable word, she is again scolding her. She is telling you, stop blubbering, you are not a baby. That means stop crying, you are not a small child. You are crying like a small child. If you are old enough to go out with Charlie Spencer, you are old enough to behave properly. Now stop it. Now she is telling, if you feel that you are a grown-up child, you can have a boyfriend like Charlie Spencer, you can go with him. So you must also try to behave in a proper manner. Suddenly, children, George Pearson enters left. He is about 50. Now her husband enter. He is 50 years old and decent, pompous. Okay. And pompous is, that means affected, grand, solemn or self-important. And children, he is moving slowly. He suddenly saw his daughter Doris in tears. As they are talking, George Pearson, Mrs. Pearson husband enter, and he is a healthy man who moves with a very slow pace. As he enter, he noticed that Doris is crying. He asked her, what is the matter? And he is sure the matter won't be worthy of crying. Doris, you will see. With a sob or two on the way, George stares after her a moment and then looks at Mrs. Pearson. So George is asking his wife that, did you say something? You will see. Mrs. Pearson, yes. George, what did she mean? Mrs. Pearson told, if she is saying you will see, then you better ask what she means. Actually, what she means, what Doris actually means, she mean to say to Mr. George that how his wife is behaving, how their mother is behaving in a very rude way. George looks slowly again at the door, then at Mrs. Pearson. Then he noticed the stout that Mrs. Pearson raises for another sip. Now, children, he is even shocked that his wife is drinking a wine. She is drinking stout. It is a strong wine. And she raises her glass for another sip. Mrs. George. Now, George is very much surprised. He is asking his wife, is stout? That means, are you drinking stout? Mrs. Pearson is saying, yes. George, amazed, what are you drinking stout for? Now he's telling, why are you drinking? Why do Mrs. Pearson? Because I fancied some. Mrs. Pearson told him that I really need this some. I really like this some. George, at this time of day you are drinking wine? Mrs. Pearson, yes. What's wrong with it at this time of day? Now again she reply him in a very blunt way. She is telling what's wrong with it at this time of day. George, nothing, I suppose, any, but I've never seen you do it before. Now George is telling, nothing, I suppose, any, but I've never seen you do it before it. Now the meaning of bewildered is perplexed. Okay, the meaning of bewildered is perplexed. Mrs. Pearson, well, you are seeing me now. So he is, when he tells, I am seeing you that you are drinking stout. She said, yes, you are seeing correctly. I am drinking stout. George, yes, and I don't like it. It doesn't look right. I'm surprised at you now. George is telling me, I don't like that you should drink wine, and it doesn't look right. Right. Mrs. Pearson, well, that ought to be a nice change for you. And he told me, at this hour of the day you should not take wine. Mrs. Pearson is telling that it could be a nice change for him. She's telling you should accept changes in me also, that I'm drinking wine at this time. George, what do you mean? Now George did not understand what Mrs. Pearson mean to him. Mrs. Pearson, it must be some time since you were surprised at me. George, she explained that it has been a long time that you are surprised at me. George, I don't like surprises. I'm all for a steady going. Now George also told his wife that he doesn't like surprises. You ought to know that by this time, by the way, I forgot to tell you this morning, I would not want any tea. A special snooker match night at the club tonight. Now he is telling that I came. George, his husband is telling that there's something special is going to happen today in the night in the club, so he will not come to have a tea in his house. Now snooker, children, is a game played with cues on a billiard table in which the player uses a cue ball. Now, so he is telling he won't be needing any tea that afternoon because he has to go to play billiard, snooker in the club. There will be a match. Mrs. Pearson is telling it's okay. There is not any. She tells him that there is not any tea made, so it's fine even if you forgot to convey. George, you mean you did not get any ready? Shocked at her reply, he asked Mrs. Pearson what she just told him. Mrs. Pearson, yes, and a good thing too, it's turned out. So Mrs. Pearson is telling it's good you don't need any tea right at this time because I have not prepared any tea for you. George, he is very much shocked, he is very much aggrieved, and he told that you did not prepare any tea for me till now. Mrs. Pearson, my goodness, listen to the man, annoyed because I don't get a tea for him that he doesn't even want. Even tried that at the club. George, tried what at the club? Mrs. Pearson, going up to the bar and telling them you don't want a glass of beer but you are annoyed because they haven't already poured it out. Try that on them and see what you get. Now Mrs. Pearson is angry. She's saying, why you're telling this thing to me? And if you will do the same thing in a club, see what they are going to do with you. See, explain the situation in context of the club where he goes to the bar to tell them that he doesn't want a beer, and then he gets mad at them because they hadn't already poured some of the beer for him. She suggests that he try and see their reaction. George, I don't know what are you talking about. George pretends actually he understood everything, but he is pretending that he doesn't understand what Mrs. Pearson has just said. Mrs. Pearson, they would laugh at you even more than they do now. So she is telling they will laugh more than now. They are also laughing at you, but then they will laugh more at you. Mrs. Pearson says that the people at the club would make fun of him even more than they did. George indignantly laughed at me. They don't laugh at me. So George is telling they don't laugh at me. He gets irritated when Mrs. Pearson says that and tells her that they don't make fun of me. Mrs. Pearson, of course they do. Mrs. Pearson is telling to her husband, you are feeling they don't make fun of you, but they do make fun of you. You ought to have found it out by this time. Anybody else would have done. You are one of their standing jokes, famous. They call you Pompey Pearson because they think you are so slow and pompous. Now pompous is self-important. Pompous is okay. George, never. George is horrified at her words and he denies it. It's always beaten me why you should want to spend so much time at a place where they're always laughing at you. Now Mrs. Pearson is telling to her husband that you are passing a lot of time to that place where everybody is making fun of you. And here I am giving you a lot of respect and you doesn't want to stay here with me. So they are laughing behind your back. She further added that he does it every night instead of going out with Mrs. Pearson, who doesn't at least make him look like a fool. She told him she respects him. She doesn't behave with him like the people of the club behave with him. They laughed at him. And then also he doesn't want to stay with her. Now, Siren enters with a glass of milk in one hand and a thick slice of cake in the other. George almost stays, turned to him peppingly. George, here Cyril, you have been with me to the club once or twice. They don't laugh at me and call me Pompey Pearson, do they? Cyril is embarrassed, hesitate. Go on, tell me, do they? He asked Cyril angrily if he knew this had been going on in the club, leaving Cyril embarrassed and unwilling. Cyril, well, yes, Dad, I'm afraid they do. George slowly looks from one to the other, staggered. So even the son supports her mother. He tells, they do it. I will be damned. George exits left slowly, almost as if somebody had hit him over the head. Now children, George curses himself slowly. He feels more insulted that if they call him names at the club, then he may go to hell. He leaves the scene in shock and despair, as if he has been hit on the head. Cyril sees him go and then turns to talk to Mrs. Pearson. Now the son talks to her mother. Now you should not have told to him that, Mom. That's not fair. You have hurt his feeling and mine too. Now Cyril is telling that you should not be so rude with the father. You have spoken to him in such a rude way and you have hurt him and even my feeling. Mrs. Pearson, sometimes it does people good to have their feeling hurt. Now Mrs. Pearson is telling that it is good to have somebody hurt sometime. The truth ought not to hurt anybody for long. If your father did not go to the club so often, perhaps they would stop laughing at him. Now she is telling, I am telling the truth, and it is the truth which always hurt. She is telling, your father, every time he goes to the church, okay, and there the people laughed at him. So he should not go often. He should go after some time, so the people should not make fun of him. Cyril, gloomily, I doubt it. Cyril say he doesn't believe in whatever Mrs. Pearson has to say at the moment. Now children, Mrs. Pearson is saying, possibly you do, but what I doubt is whether your opinion worth having. Now he's telling you, okay, Mrs. Pearson is telling you, okay, I am having my ideas, you are having your own ideas, and even I am having doubt on your ideas. What do you know? Nothing. You spend too much time and good money at greyhound races. Now she's telling that you are talking about these things because all he knows is spending time and money on greyhound races and ice shows. So he's telling, what do you know about this house, about me, about your father? Nothing, because you are passing most of the time in watching the greyhound races and ice shows. Cyril sulkily, well, what if I do? I've got to enjoy myself somehow, haven't I? Now Cyril is telling, then what should I do? Even I have got my life, I have to go somewhere for enjoyment. He mentioned that he doesn't find any problem in doing so if it brings him joy. Mrs. Pearson, I would not mind so much if you were really enjoying yourself, but are you? And where it's getting you? There's a sharp, hurried knocking heard of left. Now suddenly, children, she heard that somebody is knocking at the door. Cyril, might be for me, I will see. Now he is thinking that somebody has visited his house, and Cyril, he goes, okay, and he hurried. In a moment he re-enters, closing the door behind him. Is that silly old bag from next door, Mrs. Fraser Lord? Now children, he is laughing. He is not having any respect for Mrs. Fraser Lord also, who is really Mrs. Pearson. He doesn't regard her very respectfully and asks Mrs. Pearson if she really wants to see her. Mrs. Pearson, certainly I do. Now he thought his mother would say no, but Mrs. Pearson told him, of course I would like to see her, and don't call her a silly old bag either. And she is telling, you must know how to behave respectfully with elderlies. You should not have called her a silly old bag. She is a very nice woman with a lot more senses than you will ever have. Now she is supporting her friend. She is telling she is a good woman with all the senses. She is having with nice, better sense than you people. Cyril exit left. Mrs. Pearson finishes her stout, smacking her lips. Who? Come in, Mrs. Fraser Lord. Now he tells Mrs. Fraser Lord to come in. And Mrs. Pearson, at the meantime, she finishes her stout and greets her when she finally sees her. Mrs. Fraser Lord, moving to left center anxiously. Just wonder if everything all right. Now children, who is this Mrs. Fraser Lord? She's actually Mrs. Pearson, and she comes to watch her house, and she feels that everything is all right. Hesitating, she enters and asks if all is going well. Cyril, no, it is not. So Cyril tells her, no, it is not. He is not aware that Mrs. Fraser Lord is actually her own mother. Mrs. Pearson sharply, of course it is. You be quiet. Now Mrs. Pearson started scolding her. Who actually is Mrs. Fraser Lord, she is telling, of course everything is all right. You be quiet. Cyril. Now Cyril is very angry and he's telling, why should I be quiet? Mrs. Pearson, shouting, because I tell you, you silly, spoiled young Pearson. Pearson is a foolish person. Pearson. Mrs. Fitzgerald. Oh no, surely. Mrs. Fitzgerald tried to interrupt. Now, Mrs. Fitzgerald, just let me manage my family in my own way. Now, Mrs. Fitzgerald is telling, just let me manage my family in my own way, please. Mrs. Fitzgerald, yes, but Cyril, sulky and glorying, Mr. Cyril Pearson, to you, Mrs. Fitzgerald, Mrs. Fitzgerald, she come, she is asking her what's happened. Actually, it is Mrs. Pearson who's wanted to know why Cyril is getting so angry. Mrs. Pearson calmly, nothing much, just putting them in their places, that all. Mrs. Pearson is very angry. Who is Mrs. Pearson here? It is Mrs. Fitzgerald. So what she is telling? She is telling, I just want to put them in their right places. Well, Mrs. Fitzgerald, is George home? She sits beside Mrs. Pearson on the setting. Mrs. Fitzgerald is asking, is her husband is there? Moving closer to Mrs. Pearson, Mrs. Fitzgerald asks her if George is home. Mrs. Pearson, yes, I've been telling him what they think of him at the club. So Mrs. Pearson told, yes, I've been telling him what they think of him at the club. They laugh at him, they make fun of him. Mrs. Fitzgerald is telling, well, they think a lot of him, don't they? Mrs. Pearson, no, they don't, and now he knows it. Now Mrs. Pearson is telling, George was not aware of all this thing, but now he knows it. Mrs. Fitzgerald, oh dear, I wish you hadn't. Mrs. Fitzgerald, now Mrs. Fitzgerald, who really is Mrs. Pearson, she is telling, you should not have told to him. Mrs. Pearson, nonsense, doing them all a word of good, and they will be eating out of your hand. Soon you will see eating off your hand. Be submissive. Now she is telling that you have to put your foot down. Now Mrs. Pearson, the who really is Mrs. Fitzgerald, she is telling, this is the moment that you have to put down, and its a consequence would soon be visible. Consequence result, everyone will start obeying and respecting you. Mrs. Fitzgerald, I don't think I want them eating out of my hand. Mrs. Fitzgerald tell Mrs. Pearson that she doesn't want to be manipulative or dominating, and them to be submissive. Mrs. Pearson is telling, well, whatever you want, they will be doing it, all three of them. Mark my word, Mrs. Pearson. Now children, George enters left glumly. He is unpleasantly surprised when he sees the visitor. He moves to the armchair left, sits down heavily and glumly light his pipe. Then he looks from Mrs. Pearson to Mrs. Fitzgerald, who is regarding him anxiously. George, just looked in for a minute. I suppose, Mrs. Fitzgerald. So Mrs. George is telling, just look for a minute, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Mrs. Fitzgerald, who doesn't know what she is saying. Well, yes, I suppose so, George. George, aghast. George, now children, he is very much surprised that Mrs. Fitzgerald, who actually is Mrs. Pearson, he is telling her, he is calling her by his name. So she is telling, Mrs. Fitzgerald is telling, oh, I am sorry. She gets nervous and apologizes for addressing him by his name. Mrs. Pearson impatiently, what does it matter? Your name is George, isn't it? Who do you think you are, Duke of Edinburgh? Now Mrs. Pearson, again she insults him. Mrs. Pearson actually is here. Mrs. Fitzgerald, just you remember it. So she is telling, what does it matter? You have called him by the name of George. It is not bad. Who is he? He is not a Duke of Edinburgh. Duke is a king. George angrily. What he's got to do with it? Just tell me that. And is not it bad enough without her calling me George? No tea, Pompey Pearson. And poor Doris has been crying her eyes out upstairs. Yes, crying her eyes out. Now, children, George is very angry. He loses his temper and points out that brings the Duke of in between this conversation. Make no sense. He tells that she is talking about the Duke of Edinburgh between their conversation. It is not making any sense. He further adds that Mrs. Fitzgerald is calling by his name. Doesn't matter because the already prevailing situation is much worse. and he tells to his friend the tea is not ready, and she is scolding Doris, she is crying. Mrs. Fraser Lord, oh dear, I ought to have known. George, staring at her and not, you ought to have known. Why ought you to have known? Nothing to do with you, Mrs. Fraser Lord. Look, we are at 6 and 7 years just now, so perhaps you will excuse us. At 6 and 7, in a state of total confusion and disarray. Mrs. Pearson, before Mrs. Fraser Lord can reply, I won't excuse you, George Pearson. Next time a friend and neighbor comes to see me, just say something when you see her. Good evening, or how do you do, or something. Don't just march in and sit down without a word. It is a bad manner. Now, Mrs. Fraser Lord, Mrs. Pearson, who actually is Miss Ferrol, she started scolding him. She started telling him that it is not good when one of my friend come or neighbor comes to meet me, you should not come and sit here. You should only say good evening or good morning to him, and you should go from here. Mrs. Pearson, no, it is not all right. Well, have some decent manner in this house, or I will know the reason why. Glaring at George. George, well, Dad, George is telling, okay. Mrs. Pearson, why don't you get off to your club? The special night tonight is not it. They will be waiting for you, wanting to have a good laugh. Go on then. Don't disappoint them. Now, Mrs. Pearson is very angry. She is fighting with the door. She is taunting him the way, and she tells George to get up from there and go to the club for that special night. And she again insult him by telling that he should be hurry for his friends, and because his friends would be waiting for him to laugh at him and to disappoint him. George, that's right. Make me look silly in front of her now. Go on, don't mind. 6s and 7s. Poor Doris been crying her eyes out, getting the neighbors in to see the fun. Now she's telling, you are creating own scene in your house. You are inviting neighbor to have fun with our house. Let them hear what is the matter with you. Have you gone barmy or what? Barmy is crazy. Now George is telling him, you have gone barmy or what? Mrs. Pearson, if you shout at me again like that, George Pearson, I will slap you, big fat. Now children, she crossed the limit, and she tells him, if you will shout me and I will slap you. Mrs. Fraser Lord, she is moaning. She started crying. She said, oh no, please, Mrs. Fraser Lord. And Mrs. Fraser Lord sits. George is staring at her bewildered. Either I am off my chum or you two are. How do you mean? No, please, Mrs. Fraser Lord. Look, you are Mrs. Fraser Lord. So why are you telling yourself to stop when you are not doing anything? Tell her to stop. Then there would be some sense in it. So, children, George is very angry. He loses his temper. Both husband and wife, they are fighting. And in this way, children, Mrs. Fraser, who is actually Mrs. Pearson, she sees what is happening in her house when she is worried. So that's all with today's video. Thank you and have a nice day ahead.